President Cyril Ramaphosa's declaration of a national state of disaster to tackle the country's energy crisis has been met with mixed views from various quarters. The Disaster Act, which allows government to access some much-needed resources, like under the coronavirus pandemic, results in an abuse of funds in some instances. We now get reaction from civil society groups. Newzroom Afrika's Mbali Thethani is on the story. Mbali, good morning. You continue to get reaction on State of the Nation address from last night.
That's certainly right, Hugo. Of course, a number of South Africans have heard from the President declaring a state of disaster. And of course, this is not the first time we have seen that declaration in South Africa. You'd remember that in 2020, this was the norm for a couple of months and leading up to even 2021. But we know that comes with a lot of regulations. But at the same time, many civil society groups even questioning the modalities of this state of disaster. So we're going to get reaction from OUTA. When we've seen the President making that declaration as OUTA, what is your view with this state of disaster because of the energy crisis?
Yeah, we believe it's a mechanism that is unfounded. It is not the right way to go about fixing our energy problems. We worry that when you introduce state of disaster, the regulations allows the government to relax the environmental impact assessments, the rationality, and this could shoe in things like the car power ships deal, which we're in court on and stopping it because of its economic impact, its gross economic impact and environmental impact. So we think that it's wrong for a government to be the reason and the cause of the disaster in the first place and then introduce a state of disaster. They can fix Eskom without the state of disaster.
We saw a state of disaster under COVID-19, and one would say that we also then saw, a new ground being bred there for things like corruption. We saw the PPE scandals coming out of that. One would also say that as much as we see the state of disaster, but it is also a time where we know that there can be some sort of corruption that South Africans can even face.
Yeah, there could be, more so in the procurement space. But, Eskom and the departments are getting on top of that procurement corruption. They're doing a reasonably good work there. What the state of disaster, we're trying to unpack what its real intention is. Is it to shoe in fracking? Is it to shoe in seismic offshore initiatives that try and bring in the oil and that without the right environmental impact? So those are our biggest concerns. We also think that this knee-jerk reaction to bring in the Ministry of Electricity, when you've got two other departments dealing with it, is just going to throw a lot more confusion, lack of accountability into dealing with this issue. So, you don't throw people at the problem and new departments at the problem. You fix those that are not delivering. And it is DPE and DMRE that are not delivering. We don't have long-term energy security plans because we don't even have an integrated resource plan. Those are things that have been lying on the Gwede Mantashe's desk, the President's desk, on the integrated energy plan. Just do your jobs properly and let's work to a plan and let's fix Eskom. And if you've got procurement issues, you don't introduce a state of disaster. We can fix the procurement constraints in other ways.
And you point out exactly that we have a public enterprises minister. We also have an energy minister. Why is there a need for a third minister? What can South Africans draw from a third minister now dealing with the electricity crisis in this country?
What they can draw from this decision is that you have a government with knee-jerk reactions to problems. So they're not dealing with accountability. They've got the wrong people in these departments. They're not holding them to account to the issues. There's too much political meddling. So the President says, well, I'll bring in a Minister of Electricity and he'll report directly to me in the Presidency. Well, all cabinet members report to him ultimately. And it doesn't instill any faith and any confidence in government's ability to deal with this crisis. We see this in many companies. You just throw people at the problem instead of strategically dealing with what has to be tackled inside these two ministries. It's a disaster, quite frankly, and it's not even laughable. It's becoming quite tragic.
A number of South Africans even questioning, of course, the need for the state of disaster, especially when we look at the regulations in which we had under COVID-19. Some were even saying that the regulations we had were quite laughable and quite ridiculous. When it comes to how this state of disaster will be carried out, what will you be looking into as OUTA?
Well, we want to see what informed it. Have they followed the law? Is there rationality? Because government can't just go about introducing irrational situations like a state of disaster if it's not well informed. And then what is the intention thereof? And our legal team is looking at it right now to see, is there a need? First of all, we don't want to just jump in and challenge something for the sake of it. So is there a need to do so, and on what grounds would we do so if we wanted to interdict the state of disaster in a court of law? But there's just too many unanswered questions. There's no clarity in this plan, and he hasn't instilled confidence in the public from his announcements at SONA last night.
And I was about to ask you, do you have any faith at all or any hope that when it comes to resolving the energy crisis that we are on the right path as a country to finally seeing, the lights on again?
Well, I think there are plans. They're not clear plans. It's not like there is no plan, but the interventions that they're bringing on are muddying the waters and they're going to add more confusion, especially in accountability. Now, who's going to be accountable for what element of our energy security between these new three departments? Because that's the problem in so much of what's wrong in this country. It's not just the energy crisis, it's the water crisis, it's the rail crisis that we have. And we've heard a lot of the promises that he made last night, we've heard them all before, some of them over a number of years. So again, you start widening this gap in this trust between citizens and government when you just continuously bring on old plans that you've demonstrated you've been unable to implement.
Thank you very much. That is Wayne Duvenage from OUTA there, Hugo, calling on for clarity when it comes to that declaration that has been done by the President, putting the country under a state of disaster because of the electricity crisis.
Mbali Thethani coming to us from Randburg as we continue to get reaction to yesterday's State of the Nation address. And